Your chest feels light before the day even begins, and you call it drive, right? We all do. But today, we're diving into this book, Peak Performance. And Peak Performance starts off with this quiet, almost uncomfortable challenge to how we actually operate. Peak Performance tells us that your edge isn't just about forcing things. In fact, Peak Performance warns that applying force without recovery just turns into biological waste. You know that feeling. You open your eyes and the day has literally already started inside you. Not the actual sun coming up day, but that internal one. The one with pressure right there in your ribs, a biological pulse running way too fast, and your jaw is already clenched and set to move. It's that voice saying, move now or fall behind. Now, authors Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus, they aren't here to give you some soft motivational pep talk. No, Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus are actually tracing a biological pulse to show you exactly why that internal pressure is totally miscalibrated. Your operating system just has a glitch, and we're going to look at why. So the core equation of this book is surprisingly simple. It goes stress plus rest equals growth. And look, you might see that and instantly feel a pang of resistance. I get it. You might be way more loyal to strain than you are to growth. And honestly, it's not because you're foolish. You're loyal to the strain because it paid off for you before. It got you the degree, right? It pushed through the late nights. It earned people's trust when proof felt really scarce. You've sunk years into proving that you can take more stress, so it feels entirely natural to just cling to it. But here's the reality slap. The problem isn't your ambition, not at all. The problem is the faulty internal filter your ambition is using right now. You've turned strain into a filter, so your mind automatically rejects recovery as weakness. It's almost like an immune response to resting. And this book asks a pretty brutal question. What if the harder choice is actually biologically the wrong choice? Not always, not forever, but just right now, because the body only lives in the now. Your identity might be living in old applause and past achievements, but actual biological adaptation, that only happens in the present reality. Section 1. The Biology of Excellence. Mechanism over morality. You see, you've trained your nervous system to read strain as a virtue. But that's not a character flaw. It's just a learned signal path where the organism mistakes fatigue for proof. Look at this quote. It perfectly captures that false belief running in the background of our minds. I really wish this weren't true. But look at where this logic leads. If strain proves that you're serious, then doing less strain actually threatens your identity, right? If recovery lowers your visible strain, then recovery feels like you're losing proof of your worth. So the ambitious person just keeps loading the organism, not because the tissue or the actual work demands it, but because the self-image demands it. You just keep loading up to avoid feeling like your identity is slipping away. But this biological framework from the book reveals the actual truth. Tissue doesn't grow during the load alone. Learning doesn't settle into the brain just during the input alone. The organism desperately needs contrast. The load provides the signal, sure, but the organism needs the release and the assimilation for that adaptation signal to actually land. And if there's no landing, there's no return. Picture muscle tissue after a really hard training session. The stress is real, and tiny damage has been done to the fibers. But the body doesn't call that growth yet. It just calls it information. Then comes the repair, and only then comes the adaptation. Now, translate that to an ambitious mind under a petri dish. A grueling meeting, that's load. A deep 4-hour writing sprint, load. But load without release doesn't build your capacity, it just becomes inflammation. Your biology knows this, even if your daily calendar doesn't. And that brings us to a really miscalibrated spectrum. On one end, you just keep pushing with constant strain. You feel razor sharp for maybe an hour, and then your nervous system leaves you dull and foggy for 3 days. On the other end of the spectrum, you just collapse into fake rest. You scroll on your phone, you drift away, and you call it recovery. Neither end of this is clean. One overdoses the biological signal, and the other numbs the signal entirely. But here's the beautiful resolution. They're actually both symptoms of the exact same misunderstanding. You're treating recovery as an escape route, a mood to sink into when you just can't take the pressure anymore. But recovery isn't whatever stops the pressure. Recovery is the specific biological condition needed to receive the next dose. When you see it like that, it removes the romance from exhaustion, and it completely removes the shame from stopping. Section 2, Purpose as Energy Regulator, the biological anchor. This is the exact spot where highly intelligent people become incredibly crude with themselves. They can read complex markets, but they literally cannot read their own pulse. They weaponize their discipline to ignore their own biological feedback, treating sleepiness as an insult to their willpower. This book fundamentally redefines what purpose actually is. It's not a motivational slogan you slap on a wall. Purpose is a biological regulator. It helps your system stay with hard things by giving the pain a genuine physiological reason. But even more importantly, it gives the rest a physiological reason, which allows you to recover with way less shame. I want you to hold this image in your mind for a second. Just a single muscle fiber sitting under a warm amber light. It isn't heroic, it isn't broken, it's just alive. It has taken the stress, and now it quietly needs the exact right conditions to adapt. The visible part was the strain, but the really important part, the actual biological magic, is the quiet response happening right now under that amber light. So, think about this. What would change if recovery became evidence of commitment? Not an escape hatch, but actual evidence that you care about tomorrow's capacity. Evidence that the work matters beyond just today's panicked pulse. At UpGoEyes, we champion this kind of intellectual refinement. A crude eye just looks at hours and pain. But a refined eye, it asks what the pain is actually doing to the organism, and it uses rest as absolute proof of serious intent. Section 3. The identity cost. Displays versus processes. Our old filter demands visible soreness, doesn't it? It wants the late nights. It wants other people to witness the heavy load you're carrying as proof of your worth. But we're stepping into a heavier, quieter reality right now. We need to measure what this theatrical display is actually costing the organism. Look at this spectrum. On one side, we have prestige suffering. It gives you a fast identity, it's highly visible, and it relies entirely on having witnesses. On the other side, you have a repeatable rhythm. It's much quieter, it results in slower but very real biological adaptation, and it relies strictly on biology. The wrong choice keeps winning out because prestige suffering pays out in status way sooner than biology pays out in actual capacity. But here's how we distinguish the two. A display has to stay visible to others. But a living biological process, it just needs to stay responsive to its own internal pulse. Performance is a living process. When you start treating it as a display, you lose your internal signal quality. Everything starts feeling urgent, and you completely stop listening to what the organism actually needs to survive and adapt. Imagine a performer backstage. The crowd is totally gone. The lights are cold. No one is standing around clapping for them, drinking water, or getting sleep. Yet that visceral, deeply inward moment is exactly where tomorrow's performance begins. Biology has absolutely no interest in theatrical drama. It only asks what can be metabolized and used. Section 4, Adaptation Needs a Pulse. The Cleaner Return. We open this explainer by noticing that your chest felt late before the day even began. Well, now you can actually name why. You woke up under an old identity debt. You were confusing metabolic heat with actual growth, demanding a constant state of strain from an organism that only understands rhythm. You do not need less ambition. You really don't. You simply need better timing. If your craft truly matters to you, you cannot keep wasting the worker. You can't keep dulling the nervous system's instrument just to prove you are willing to suffer for it. Excellence has a nervous system, and it requires precision, not just blunt force. Notice how this sequence isn't just decorative. Stress matters, rest matters, purpose matters. This is the essential biological pulse of mature ambition. At UpGoEyes, we believe self-mastery isn't about self-attack. It is cleaner perception under pressure. It's recognizing that an impressive person can endure a heavy load, but a refined person creates the conditions to actually adapt to it. This book leaves us with a real demand to stop wasting our effort. So carry one sharper question into your next hard hour. We aren't looking for a full self-reform here, just a shift in your biological lens. When your pride wants theater, or when you're tempted to turn your tiredness into some kind of moral failing, ask a cleaner question. What dose lets me adapt? Because ultimately, adaptation needs a pulse. Before your next hard session, if your body feels flat, that is your signal to change the dose, not quit.